Okay.
Hey everyone, I am Paul Baker and I am the CEO for the Chamber of Commerce here in the Greater Idaho Falls area, and I'm here with Brad Whipple, who is running for seat 2 in the council seat for Idaho Falls. So Brad, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. And I guess we'll start off with the straightforward question as to tell me why you've decided to run for city council.
Well, I experienced what local politics was like and how elected officials at the local level can really influence land use decisions. Myself and my wife are in the middle of developing an RV park, so we went through planning and zoning, and then were denied at the county commissioner level. And, this is out in Custer County, and that ultimately ended in a lawsuit, which we won, but that dragged things out. The taxpayers had to pay for costly legal battle, legal fees. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of opened my eyes to, maybe I should run. Maybe I should get more involved locally. And what really cemented my decision to run is I noticed that several candidates were running on platforms of, we need to stop the growth. We're not happy with how fast Idaho Falls is growing. We don't want any more building, which you certainly can do that. But that's not without its consequences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really bad policy. I think that's really going to harm younger residents of Idaho Falls. If you cap the amount of building, simple supply and demand economics, you're going to see prices skyrocket, or you're going to see people go elsewhere, mm-hmm. or a combination of both. And now you might say, hey, that's great, they'll go elsewhere. Well, they're going to look to places like Ammon. And what you'll get is you might get higher prices and you'll get worse traffic. You get a large influx of people to Ammon. Well, there's a lot of traffic east-west, as people go to the interstate or people go to the national lab where they work. So Ammon will get the tax base, Idaho Falls will get the traffic.
Yep.
So all around, I think, a bad situation. So I tossed my hat in the ring to be a reasonable policy of, hey, we can't just stop growth, mm-hmm.
Because it's inconvenient. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I've had lots of conversations this last, I guess 3-4 weeks, with the public and with candidates, and growth is definitely the top of everyone's, big stress and big concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm very conscious of it too. But I guess I agree with your point that growth is happening and that we have to accept that it's happening. Mm-hmm. But how do you manage growth in such a way that you don't lose the sense of community and the sense of identity that we all love about Idaho mm-hmm. Falls?
So I think the main one is putting that growth where it makes sense. Mm-hmm. There's been proposals that we'll just take all the high density stuff and we'll toss it somewhere else. We'll put it over in Snake River Landing. And there's a few problems with that as well. As one is, you're making a big assumption that the owners of that land want to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Idaho Falls doesn't build anything.
Right.
We only get to say no to things. Mm-hmm. And I think that the government should be very cautious when it says no, when it tries to pull at the strings of the open market. Is there times to do that? Absolutely. But for a lot of these developments, they're happening along main roads. They're happening next to resources like grocery stores. They're happening next to parks, which this is all cut down on traffic. Mm-hmm. Right? If you put it all in one area, you're going to see a huge influx of traffic as they all distribute out wherever they're going and then come back. So that's the primary one. And then 2 is making sure that the infrastructure can keep up with that growth. It'd be nice to say that should be a proactive approach, and it should be. You can't just say, well, this development's going to push sewer beyond its capacity. You just can't have that.
Right.
However, what pays for growth is the growth. Mm-hmm. Right? At the time of collection of impact fees, that's at the point that we should really be using those funding to specifically improve the infrastructure, the parks, and things like that, where that's happening.
So, I appreciate that perspective also. I guess in terms of everything else that you're concerned about related to growth, obviously a sense of community, a sense of identity, thinking about where to place things, how do you kind of communicate the decisions you're making as a city council person to the rest of the community to help assuage those worries and concerns regarding growth? How do you do that? How do you communicate that?
Well, first, I show up to things like this, and I interview, and I have somewhat of an open door policy. I'm very quick to respond either through Facebook Messenger, email, all of these things. Anyone I talk to, they say the same things, right? We're losing our identity, or there's a number of concerns that people bring up, the traffic, the this, and the first approach is to try and educate. Right? So, there's a thought there that, well, we just need to go back to single family housing, or maybe that the single family housing is so expensive because the developers are just being greedy. Well, there's the price is the price. There's a lot of things through that pipeline that have gotten really expensive, materials, labor, all these things. So
yeah, well, the cost of money.
The cost of there's since 2015, I think the money supply has doubled in 10 years, and that's insane. And so there's a lot of problems that's at play here, and I think a lot of them happen at the national level, and us at City Council sort of have to play the hand that we've been dealt, which is unfortunate. But this type of growth, this type of building will build a stronger community, because you're going to allow people have some sort of pipeline into housing, right? If you just pull out some of the lowest cost housing, right? Let's say we take away the apartments, we take away the townhomes. Well, now your new lowest price housing is $409,000, because I checked 2 weeks ago. That's the cheapest new build, and you might say, well, they'll buy the used homes. Well, there's 9 of them that are under $250,000, and they're all about that price.
Yep.
And so whatever you're picturing in your head, the 9 cheapest houses, that's what they look like. So.
And you also have a shift in demands and expectations that comes with the newer generation. Also, that's another factor to consider. And the example I give you is that the boomer generation have a significant amount of lot size, and a lot of garden to mow, and we're starting to see folks who are that 55 plus not wanting that, so they're shifting into the 55 plus communities, and so builders are like, oh yeah, I'll build that community. That there's a demand there. Yeah. Equally, young people coming up onto the market are looking for an affordable home, but they're not necessarily looking for a high cost of maintenance. Yeah. Either, and so there's a shift in demand and expectation that's also happening. That happens with every generation. Exactly. Right. And so I appreciate that you've taken the time to consider what is the kind of lowest price house that's new build right now. If you were to take the single family homes, well, what does that do? Or if you take the high density, what does that do? Right. But the private sector, who I represent, will generally tell you what the data is saying. Yeah. And that this is worth investing in because there's a demand for it. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it comes back to, and I've been kind of keeping tabs on some of this conversation too, is being careful about respecting individuals' property rights, and that there's limitations to what you can do as a city council from a legal perspective. Yes. And so I'd love to get you kind of expand on that a little bit, and kind of there's a lot of folks, some actually within the pack that's competing for the very seat that you're running for. What's your sort of stance on that, and give me just a little bit more on expanding on that thought, really. On the limitations of city council, what they can do legally. Yeah. So this is something that I'm intimately familiar with, because like I said, I had to file suit in district court to be able to develop my own property. Right. Not only did I do that, but I represented myself. So I sort of, good for you. I joke with people, I gave myself a jailhouse law degrre, and it was sometimes that's the best way to learn, though. It was a lot harder than I was expecting. From an engineering background, I've been in the research space, so I'm familiar with a white paper, right? But not at all familiar with a legal brief. Yeah. I guess kind of the 30,000 foot view is the state really does have a lot of control, and they dictate what counties can do and what municipalities can do. So in, I think 1975, they passed, your state's representative passed LUPA, the Local Land Use Planning Act. Yeah. And so that sets up a framework for, this is how you will, cities and counties, this is how you're going to do your land use planning. And all the decisions effectively have to come from your comprehensive plan and your local ordinances. And the courts treat these as state statute. They interpret them as state statute, and that's the law.
And so when your governing bodies, whether it's a planning and zoning, an adjustment board, or ultimately it gets appealed to city council, they sit as a quasi-judicial branch of government. And so they have to follow their own rules. And so if the rules say, hey, this type of zoning, this is allowed, well, then it's allowed. And city council has to be very careful in how they make these decisions too, right? Concerned taxpayers versus Kootenai County. Everyone, similar situated people, they have to be treated the same. So if you're, the other part of this, if you're going to let some people build, and there's a very similar situation, and you're going to tell others no, like you could see yourself in, or the city could see itself in some legal hot water.
Yep.
So there's sort of delicate things that need to be tiptoed around, and there's a certain amount of wisdom that needs to go into making these land use decisions.
Yeah, and I would even say that's definitely one area that needs to be articulated, I think, and communicated more effectively.
I would agree. In fact, when it comes to land use decisions, the Supreme Court has ruled that explaining your decision, explaining the city's decision, that is not perfunctory. It has to be done. And I think that's really important, not only verbally at the time of the decision, right? Because I think land use decisions, more than anything else, bring people out with very strong opinions. And I think that those people are entitled to an explanation of why the decision is happening. I don't think budget decisions necessarily bring the type of crowds that a land use decision makes.
Yeah. So let's just talked about comprehensive plan. Imagine IF is something that's come up in conversation a lot. What's your thoughts on that, and kind of what's your position on it? Is it something that you definitely would like to keep, or is it something you want to pump the brakes on, or is it something you kind of want to evolve?
I think that there's always, nothing's ever perfect. There's always room for improvement. I've heard some critiques over different areas of the Imagine IF, and a lot of it has to do with high density housing. I'm a believer that high density housing is necessary. It's not just like what the preference is, because I think that a lot of people that live in high density housing, they would certainly prefer to live in their own four walls. Everyone wants the white picket fence, and the unfortunate thing is this is an artifact of the decline of the American standard of living, and city council is in the unfortunate position, or really the citizens are, that we have to play the hand that we're dealt. So I think that we definitely need to allow the free market to exist in the space of Idaho Falls to build the type of housing that people are buying, right? They're still building single family housing, just no one's buying a $410,000 house. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath, by all means, a starter home. Now, I do have several changes I would like to make to the city ordinances. And we're on the topic of land use planning. One of the changes I'd like to make is change how appeals are handled. We talked about LUPA. We talked about how ordinances and comprehensive plans are treated as state statute or interpreted as statute. Right now, if you appeal a decision from planning and zoning, it'll go before your elected representatives at city council. However, it's only based on the record, what would be called an appellate review.
Yeah.
And so what I'd like to do is open that up so that it could be handled as a de novo review, as new, right? Because if you've got, let's say a developer was developing something next to you, and you show up, that first public hearing is going to be the first time you hear of it. You're going to hear the facts, and there may be some like glaring issues that you think like, well, I need to go hire a professional engineer, my own engineer, to because I have a hunch, but I need to hire the professional.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to be able to bring that guy to the appeal because it's going to only be based on the record.
Yeah.
And I think it's the other part of that is it's important to have your elected representatives have more final say in a land use decision that is, you're going to have a lot of opinion on it, right, versus an appointee of the adjustment board or the planning and zoning commission. They're not elected. That's
an interesting idea. It definitely does lend more color to the whole picture versus just what's on the paper, and also I'm looking at this from a whole different variety of different angles. Actually, I think also to have the opportunity to bring in an expert, an independent expert, to reevaluate something perhaps, or again, there could also be information from the city side that perhaps the landowner hadn't considered as well, that there is an opportunity for some revision and discussion that kind of doesn't exist as a result of the current format.
Yeah, in the current format, I mean, it's really here's 3 minutes to speak your piece. Whatever you thought of, that's it. Because as soon as this goes to appeal, it's a sealed envelope of, well, this is the only thing we can.
How receptive do you think the other city council members would be to that idea?
That's a good question.
Because that puts a little bit more work on their plates, doesn't it? But
I think it could be that they may have to review new information. I mean, ultimately, what I think where this might face some opposition is from the mayor, because ultimately this would be stripping some power from the mayor. Right? The mayor is going to appoint these appointees at the Planning and Zoning Board. They'll appoint the Adjustment Board, and they're very difficult to remove from the City Council. It takes a unanimous vote.
Right.
And so in doing so, in changing it to a de novo review, I mean, really, ultimately, the City Council will get the final say, and it won't be, as it currently stands, the Adjustment Board and the Planning and Zoning Board have a large say in how.
Do you think people would be receptive to the general citizenship, that you're kind of removing a decision-making power from the executive branch, so they can't, I guess, as a result, therefore, are not able to work completely autonomously in terms of the appointee process? Is this a Brad idea, or is this like I've gone out and done some research?
This is a Brad idea that's been vetted with people I've talked to.
Well, I see the appeal. I immediately see the appeal. It's not something I've ever considered.
The appeal is ultimately, decisions, these planning and zoning decisions, these land use decisions probably affect people's lives the most. And they draw the biggest crowds to the public hearings, bar none. And so I think the angle of the final say is going to go to people that I elected, I voted for, and are elected by the people. And I think that's a very strong and compelling argument. I think that the flip side of the coin is going to come from if you like city council, if you have faith in city council versus you have faith in your mayor, right? If you have let's say, the anti-growth narrative. If you elect a mayor who is anti-growth, he might put people in the planning and zoning and the adjustments board who are going to try and work that narrative and interpret the Imagine IF document to support this anti-growth vision. And so if you like that, and you've got a mayor in power that has those similar views, then I don't think that you would like what I'm proposing.
Right.
Because you might have a city council who recognizes the need for a free market, recognizes the need for more housing so that the younger generation of Idaho Falls has a place to live. Because otherwise, the same thing happened to Bozeman, right? Like they stopped growth, and now I think your median house price there is like $800,000.
Yeah.
And so people that were born and raised in Bozeman do not live in Bozeman. Yeah. It's your transplants.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that idea and perspective. Is not something I actually really ever considered. So I'm definitely going to take that home to ponder on a little bit and kind of review some of that research and kind of see if there's best practice also to model. Just in case that that ever does come to fruition, I want to be able to articulate and advocate for the business community also, and if that should come to pass. It's an interesting thought that no one has actually considered in all the conversations I've had.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those nuanced things that is kind of buried down, and the only reason I thought of it is because I've experienced and I've argued in my own legal briefs how city council, or how in this case county code should be interpreted.
Yeah. So let's think about I guess again on the theme of growth, the ability to collaborate. You talked about, impact decision making of developing something alongside a main arterial road and the impact that would have on that road in terms of traffic. We are neighboured with another city here, Ammon, which the chamber also represents, and we're also got the county also expanding and growing as well, and seeing some growth happening. What would be your approach to improving that collaborative process? And do you think that's something that's important that should be a priority?
Yeah, I definitely do. A lot of times if there's synergy between, even in the private sector, synergy between two private companies, if you combine the efforts, it usually ends up cheaper. And for the taxpayer, I think that could be a huge win. Or you could end up with better service too. Some areas that I see room for collaboration is emergency response, right? Because are you in Idaho Falls, are you in Ammon? I mean, a lot of times you have to look at a map to know. But that doesn't matter when you've got an emergency. So looking at ways that like the fire department could collaborate. Right now, Ammon has their own fire department. Idaho Falls contracts with the county. Seeing how maybe Ammon and Idaho Falls could maybe just combine resources a little bit better. The other area, I've been slightly critical of the spending that Idaho Falls puts towards its Parks and Recreation Department. Despite being 4 times the size of Ammon, Idaho Falls is spending like 9 times as much on our Parks and Recreation Department as the city of Ammon is. And there's some fairly large dollar figures going to like our zoo. And I certainly like our zoo. I've taken my nieces and nephews there, but maybe seeing ways that we could make an even better zoo by combining resources with Idaho Falls and Ammon, because certainly the zoo is not an exclusive amenity that Idaho Falls residents use.
So not necessarily taking anything away, but expanding the opportunity for collaboration and sharing in the responsibility and benefits that come with a resource like the zoo. And fundamentally, as a council member, budget is top of the list, of things that you have to kind of tackle and kind of decipher also. I can see that perspective. How do you kind of, again, I think that's going to come with some initial suspicion, I guess, or apprehension might be the better word. What's your kind of style that you kind of bring to the table when it comes to those kind of negotiations, and how would you approach those tough discussions, and how would you handle a no?
So it's a great question. With my engineering background, analytical background, I approach a lot of conversations if I'm, trying to get someone to kind of get on the same board, is to show them the numbers, show them like how this could be a good thing, find other areas, other cities, how they've done it, get the experts into the room. And I've already talked with the firefighters union, and I think that's my approach, is not necessarily from an emotional perspective, but from a numbers and data perspective of like, this is how this could be a big, good thing.
So we kind of dove into this all real quick, and some really good in-depth conversation, but I just kind of come to a realization I don't actually know who Brad is.
Okay.
So are you from here? You're born here? Moved in a while ago? What's your story?
So I was born and raised in Boise, Idaho, and I went to school at Boise State University, and I got an electrical engineering degree from there. After graduating, I moved out to the eastern part of the state, initially Pocatello, and then Idaho Falls for the job I landed at Idaho National Labs. While going to college, I also served in the military, so I've spent 6 years in the Idaho National Guard, so that was a great experience. Most of it was on a Bradley fighting vehicle, but after a while, rolling in the dirt got kind of old, so left the service, and I think the last time I wore a uniform was 2016. I've since gone back to school, University of Idaho, and got a master's degree in computer science, and I did that while I was working at the National Lab, and I've been married for about 8 years. My wife is originally from Idaho Falls.
Kids?
No kids.
No kids. Enjoy the freedom. I said that jokingly. I can appreciate the journey that you've been on. It sounds like you've experienced a lot and learned a lot, and I asked the question because people kind of ask the question of qualification.
Yeah.
And not that there's a specific set criteria as to what qualifies anyone to run for city council, other than having a passion and desire for their community, top of the list. But it's also good to kind of understand the subset skills that come with, you know, someone that might bring a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
You know? Especially for, you know, someone that's kind of moved in here, married a local, brings a whole other different perspective that perhaps wouldn't exist at this moment in time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as far as, you know, maybe qualifications, if we're just to talk specifics, you know, I have experience in policy. I spent a little over a year and a half writing policy for the Pentagon on cybersecurity for facility-related control systems. Of course, have a bit of, you know, quite a few years of private industry. You know, currently a manager, so I'm managing budgets within the federal government as well as the private sector. And started a small business in 2017. Like I said, I was in the military. I had first-hand experience of living out of a vehicle or a tank for weeks on end with a dead cell phone. So I started a company where I design and manufacture a cell phone charger that works in the NATO ground tactical vehicle, and I still operate that today.
Wow.
And you know, I've litigated a land use case. So I'm very familiar with how the comprehensive plan and the Idaho Falls City Code, how all these things kind of mesh together.
So, and as a result of having this conversation, typically I would ask, my kind of closing question would be kind of what do you think sets yourself apart from the other candidates running for the seat? And it's clear to me there's quite a few things that are stand out, you know, in terms of your experience and background. Is there anything else that you would love to add as we kind of wrap this up a little bit?
You know, one thing that I offer to voters is promises. You know, as you investigate a lot of candidates, there's a lot of, you know, buzzwords. There's a lot of platitudes, stuff that could be considered, you know, empty rhetoric. You know, everyone says they want to do smart planning, but what does smart planning even mean? And one thing I do on my homepage of my campaign site is I offer specific codes and sections out of the Idaho Falls City Code that I'd like to make changes. You know, we talked about one, allowing a de novo review instead of appellate. You know, I have a number of others there as well.
Cool. Well, Brad, I'd love to spend a lot longer chatting with you, but time is short, first spent, as they say. But thank you so very much for taking the time to come in here, and thank you for your service as well during your time in the military. And it means a lot. And I also kind of round this off by also thanking you for being willing to serve your community and throw your hat into the ring and come under some extra scrutiny. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure. But I wish you all the best as you pursue this council seat. And again, thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.